An interest rate swap is an agreement whereby the parties agree to swap a floating stream of interest payment for a fixed stream of interest payments, and vice versa. There is no exchange of principal. There's no exchange of principal. All we are doing is we are switching from floating to fixed and the other way around. The companies involved are termed counterparties. Are you able to see my screen? Are we able to see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. The companies involved are called counterparties, and that's a terminology that we'll be using. Unlike the other instruments that only run for not more than 1 year, like the others that take 30 years. So have you seen one advantage of the swapping arrangement already? If you ask, talk about the advantage of the swap, have you seen one advantage already? The time frame. The time frame over which we are covered. That's the advantage there. Swaps can be used to hedge against an adverse movement in interest rates. For instance, like now, if you ask which way will our interest rates go in this country? By the end of the year, where will our interest rates be? People may say, we do not know now which way they will go. With so much things happening on the international scene. 2 years from now, we have no clue. Example, say a company has 200 million floating loan. Can you imagine $200 million floating loan? And the treasurer believes that, you see that point there, very important, believes that interest rates are likely to rise over the next 5 years. He could enter into a 5-year swap with a counterparty to swap into fixed, so he can move from floating to fixed rate of interest for the next 5 years. From year 6 onwards, the company once again pay a floating rate of interest. A swap can be used to obtain cheaper finance. That's another advantage. A swap should result in a company being able to borrow what they want at a better rate and a swap arrangement than borrowing it directly themselves. So with a swap, we can end up with something better than if we borrowed ourselves. There's a saving in entering a swap. If there's no saving, you won't enter a swap arrangement. You only enter because there's a potential saving. Our first example. Company A wishes to raise 10 million. And to pay interest at a floating rate. As it would like to take advantage of any fall in the interest rate. It can borrow for 1 year at a fixed rate of 10%. Or at a floating rate of 1% above the LIBOR. Company B also wishes to raise 10 million, incidentally. They prefer to issue fixed. Now, they want fixed. Have you seen the difference? Because they want certainty about the future interest payments. But can only borrow for 1 year at 13% fixed, or LIBOR plus 2%. As it has a lower credit rating than Company A. Required. Calculate the effective swap rate for each company and assume savings are split equally. So that is what we are now going to do. We're going to go through the process. We go through the process. Step 1, identify the type of a loan with the biggest difference in rates. Let me put my spreadsheet here now. Let's put our spreadsheet here. Okay, so let's arrange the data. Yeah, that's the screen we're going to use. Okay, there we are. There. Okay, so let's answer the question. Identify the type of loan with the biggest difference. So let's go. Company A.
Sapiri.
Yes, please.
I can't see your screen.
You can't see my screen, eh?
I can just see facilitator.
Oh, because maybe I haven't shared it. I haven't shared the new screen. I haven't shared the new screen. Let's share it. Let's see what happens. What of that?
This one I'm able to see.
Okay. Let's go fixed. A can borrow fixed at how much? 10 and B 13. What of floating? What of floating? A can borrow what? L plus 1 and B can borrow L plus 2. What's the difference here? In the fixed rate, what's the difference? What's the difference in the floating? That's what that statement means. Where do you have the biggest difference? In the fixed. That's the meaning of this statement. So we have the biggest difference in the fixed. Next, identify the party that can borrow this type of loan the cheapest. Who can borrow this type of loan the cheapest? It is A. What is your recommendation? Company A should borrow fixed. Company B variable, reflecting their comparative advantages. So that's the advice that you give. So that is how you start your question. So that is your first step. Second now is estimate the gain. Estimate the gain. Estimate the gain. So now you go, you say, what would have happened without a swap? What would be the situation with a swap? What would be the situation without a swap? Now, company A wishes to raise and pay a floating. So without a swap, this is what would have happened. Without a swap, B would have paid that amount. With a swap now, we are saying A should borrow fixed and B should borrow floating. What are the totals? What are the totals? These are the totals. These are the totals. So what is the difference or the gross saving? The gross saving is 2. The gross saving is 2. So what is your conclusion? There's a potential saving. There is a potential saving of 2. And if this is split equally, each one of them can reduce their borrowing by 1%. This you must be able to do to demonstrate the benefits in a swap. Lastly, you now say, what are the possible cash flows? Possible cash flows. I'm saying possible because there are several ways, there are many ways of doing it. So one of the possibilities in terms of the cash flows is here. So you get a loan. So we borrow now. Let us show. They borrow with a swap. There we are. So this is the borrowing for these companies. But now you are going to swap obligations in a swap arrangement. So in this swap, there will be a payment and a receipt. And the receipt. There will be a payment and a receipt. Now we cooperate in a swap. So us who borrowed the floating, who borrowed the fixed, were the ones who will be paying the variable rate. So we have a payment. Now, here's one of the many swaps. One of the many possible arrangements is we take an arrangement like when you're working with a bank, when you swap partner with the bank. Despite that this company has got a good credit rating, we'll say they're the ones who are going to give them the money to pay that. And the most basic and straightforward arrangement is where we say we are going to pay floating rate at the benchmark rate, which is the LIBOR. Now, when you pay here, the same amount is being received in a swap here. So that amount which we are paying is being received here. So it becomes the receipt for the other party. In the exam, should you get a question on a swap, this is what you must do. In a swap arrangement, start off by saying that the one who's paying is going to pay the interest at the benchmark rate itself without a premium on top or adjustment factor. Let's finish it off then. So what is the net outcome? If this swap does work, what is the net outcome? Which is acceptable? The net which is acceptable is, without the swap, what would have happened? Without swap, I would have been paying L plus 1. L plus 1, this one here. So then, with a swap, I expect that you must knock off the portion of my gain. Portion of the gain. My portion of the gain, you have said 50%, so it's 1. This is what I expect. I expect this less 1, half of this, half of that. So all things being equal, my expected result, I must end up paying interest at LIBOR. That is what I expect. So this is my expectation. Out of this swap, I must end up here. So the simple question is then, if I'm going to end up with that, if I'll end up with that, how much should I receive? So how much I must receive is payment, that's a payment, that's an obligation, plus the obligation, less a receipt. So very straightforward, what should I put here? We can all say that I must receive what? I must receive a 10. So that the mathematics adds up. So that payment plus this payment, less this receipt, I end up there. And who's paying here is being paid there. So they must pay me a fixed rate of 10. That's what they must pay me. What is the end result for B? Does it reflect 12? Let's go. Payment plus payment less that receipt. What is the answer there? Can somebody give me the answer, please? Let's go. The payment plus this payment less this receipt.
12.
12. This one will count with that one. So this ends up now as 12. Do you think 12 is acceptable to be? A net result of 12, will it be acceptable? Yes. Because without the swap, they would have paid what? Without the swap, they would have paid what? 13. But now they're paying 12. So this is one possible way of demonstrating the possible cash flows that can work in a swap. Should we get a question on a swap? This is what you must do. We're going to take an exam type question and repeat this process from one of the sittings. But before we do, let me receive some questions. Before we do, I can take some questions.
Mr. Perry.
Yes, please.
It's not really a question, but it's just the way this looks. This looks to be so mechanical. That's the way I look at it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, you get confused.
So look at it this way. Maybe we start from the theory. So, Mr. Mfuya, you have borrowed fixed, I've borrowed floating. So then you say, me, I see the interest rates going up. I'm going to switch. I want to switch. So you can actually go and switch with the bank. In fact, let us pick the example with you banks. Let's do a swap. Let's look at an interest rate swap involving the bank in our notes. And I'm sure you're going to relate to it even much better. Let's do that as we are investigating your questions on how can we make sense out of this? How can we make some sense out of this? Team, let us investigate that further. We haven't left our example. Let us bring in a situation where you are swapping with a bank, where you're not swapping with Mr. Piri, but you are swapping with a bank. Let us do that. Let's see what difference that will make. So don't forget that example. Swaps involving banks. In practice, a bank normally arranges the swap. So basically, when you go to swap, Mr. Mfuya, you go to your bank and you talk to your bank. So you swap with the bank. The bank, okay, you can swap in. The ask rate at which the bank is willing to receive fixed interest cash flow stream in exchange for LIBOR. So that's what the bank is going to offer you. Or the bid rate that they are willing to pay in exchange for receiving LIBOR. The difference between these gives the bank's profit margin and is usually at least 2 basis points. So like within your bank, you can try to check probably, but even locally, but maybe regional level, whatever it is, try to check the swaps, the interest rate swaps that you have. You must have some documentation actually, depending on your department, of course, where you can actually see how you are swapping with your clients. So for you, actually, this can even make a lot more sense. Now, let's continue. Company A currently has a 12-month loan at a fixed rate of 5%, but would like to swap to variable. It can borrow at variable of LIBOR plus 12 basis points. What we mean here is that you can go and pay off a loan. Go and pay off the loan, everything, then borrow a new one. If you got a new one, it will be LIBOR plus 12 basis points. The bank is currently quoting, now this is what you're going to find at your bank. The bank is currently quoting 12-month swap rates for 4.9 and 4.95. Company A's financial position, show company A's financial position if it enters the swap. So this company A now goes to the bank and enter a swap. So that them they pay floating and the partner pays the fixed for them. And the two rates have been quoted like this, that rate and that rate. Now look at the outcome, what will happen. Remember, you have borrowed how much? You had 5%. But you want to swap to what? To floating. If you actually go and pay off the loan and get the loan at floating, it will be LIBOR plus 12 basis points. But instead of doing this, there's no need of you canceling a current loan. All you can do is just switch from fixed to floating. Here's now what happens. You have borrowed. Remember your obligation? Your obligation is what? Fixed. the bank, you are going to pay floating at LIBOR. This is what you're going to pay in this swap arrangement. Then you're going to receive. So when the bank is giving you, of those two rates, the bank will give you a lower one. The bank is going to give you a lower one. Which one? Let's go back here. The bank will give you 4.90. When you pay them, L, the bank will give you 4.90. Can I call back, please? So this is what you receive from the bank. What is the net effect? Obligation plus that one, less the receipt. Have you seen where you have ended up now? If you had going to borrow floating, you would have borrowed at LIBOR plus 0.12. Have you seen the saving you have made? So this is what happens when you go to the bank. I want to switch from a fixed to a floating rate loan, or the other way around. How is that when you're swapping with a bank?
This looks to make sense. Yeah.
Because the two rates are already there. Okay. So then we're going to take an exam type question, and we are going to slot it in the format that we have used. And the question is already within your custody. The question code CMC. So please, you all got the question code CMC. You all got a question code CMC. That's a question that we're going to use. We want to see a brief question involving a swap. Okay. Do you have your question on CMC?